alumni.
Thank you. So today I wanted to share with you the unlock the power of feature-based JavaScript development. My email is jeff@CodeWinds. My handle there is jeffbski on Twitter and GitHub. And then the slides will be available, or they are available at codewinds.com/JSConf 2018. So you can get all the slides and notes. So have you ever entered into some code base and then looking around at it and you're like, what is all this doing and why is it here? And you look at some of the comments and it doesn't help. And you know, eventually you get looking through it and you're just like, this is just like a, you know, some complicated mousetrap or something. You know, it doesn't make any sense why all this stuff's here. And then you do a git blame on it to find out who did it, and then you realize, you know, it was you. You know, it happened to anybody before? I think Michael Chan said that you know, code that you've written 6 months ago is often code you don't like anymore. So you know, it doesn't have a, you know, you always learn more things and new things, and well, that's happened to me before. Who am I? I'm married. I've got a one grown daughter, active in our Catholic parish, and been active in JavaScript for the past 7 years. Got some open source projects. Oh, it's cutting off on me in the area. Let's see. There we go. So I started a small company, CodeWinds, so I do training and consulting. So if you need any help on any of these things, I'd love to help you with your project. So why feature-based development? What are we talking about? Well, software is complex, and you know, there's always more things that keep getting added to it, and so it's you know, it's something that's always getting more complicated. You know, we've learned to start out and do like MVPs, you know, so we can try to get something out to the customer so they can see it quicker. And those things have kind of, you know, evolved how we do software. You used to try to plan out every possible thing up front, and you know, you never even get started. You know, the project takes years before all the planning. So now we're at least delivering, you know, value sooner. And so with sprints, and we're trying to evolve the code. So we've tried to do this feature-based stuff before. A lot of times we use git commits, you know, and branches to try and put whole features together and move them in, at, you know, merge at a time. And the other thing we try to do is organize by feature. So a lot of times you'll see people trying to organize their code base so that all the things around a particular domain or portion of the screen are all handled in one area. A lot of times with you know, features, you want to do A/B testing. So you'll want to turn on a new feature, or you want to change a feature to a new version. So sometimes you might have feature switches where you want people to be able to do that. Early adopters might, you know, be able to try some of your new code out. So what are the challenges with feature-based development? Well, sometimes maintaining flexibility. So we start to get too rigid and we can't use new technology. We get locked into certain frameworks. So that can be a problem. Wiring and boilerplate. Sometimes it's just a mess to try and code this stuff up so it even, you know, hooks together. So it's a lot of work. Sharing across features can be challenging as far as trying to keep things isolated, but yet still be able to share things. And then also to be able to fire things off at the right time. So sometimes things need to happen in order and different things like that. So hooks and dependencies are challenges. So some previous things that you could have done to try and do feature-based development are you could have, like I said, used pull requests and merge things together. But you know, sometimes you get through the development of the branch and the feature, and then it gets held up. You know, maybe it's waiting for something else to be done, or people want to review it again, or you know, and those guys are busy on something else, and so sometimes things don't line up, and then you know, things get merged out of order, and it's a mess. You know, it can be really challenging to try and move the code together. It's hard to A/B test too. If these features are developed, you know, where they replace each other, you know, with the commits, then there's no way to go back, or you know, and all that. So it can be tricky. So there's some boilerplate projects that try to, you know, kind of take this idea of adding features at a time, and so they'll even include like a CLI where you can generate some code that's already hooked up. And so that helps. It can work. But you're kind of locked into whatever they have. Hopefully it's an active community and they're still developing it and and upgrading it. But you kind of are stuck. If they're using a specific technology, you're kind of locked into that. So it can be pretty. And so and over time it can get stale, especially if they move on to other things. So the dependency injection frameworks. There's probably 1,000 different ones out in NPM. A lot of them are kind of complicated and they do all kinds of different things. But from what I've seen, I haven't really seen any that really fit this feature-based development process very well. You could just take a global object and start throwing stuff on that. But you can obviously have collisions, naming collisions and things so that you don't know, there's no protection against overwriting something else and no usage contracts and stuff like that. So there's challenges with doing that kind of attempt. So that leads me to FeatureU. So this is a library that Kevin Bridges wrote, one of my good friends. I worked with Kevin for about 8 years at RGA in St. Louis. And Kevin's he's an inspiring guy to me. He's had the long career, and I know I've went through my career ups and downs and got burned out a few times and get fired back up. And Kevin just seems like he's just one of those solid guys that just, plows on through, creates beautiful software, great documentation. And so he was working on a React Native and Expo project. And he got the idea, well, if he could try and extract this FeatureU-based approach from his existing project. He started to see some similarities in how things might be able to be pulled out from his app. And so that's how FeatureU kind of came about. He started from that idea. So this is primarily for a React or a React Native or Expo type app. But I think the ideas are good, and I think it could easily be applied to a lot of different frameworks in that. So it's really more universal than that. So the project is at featureu.js.org, and his GitHub is there at Kevin AST. So what are the benefits of FeatureU? Well, it's designed for feature development. I mean, that's what he built it for. It's simple and flexible. It doesn't have a lot of those complicated things that the DI frameworks have. It makes it easy for cross-feature sharing. It makes it easy to encapsulate things into specific features, organizing by feature, testing, A and B testing. And it dramatically reduces your boilerplate and wiring. When I saw how little wiring you have to do once you start using this, I was like, wow, this is good. I mean, this is good just even for non-feature development. If you wanted to get up and going, it just really dramatically reduces that wiring. He's also got lifecycle hooks where things will fire off at the right time, so you can build that into your features. He has the concept of aspects where you can extend with new technology. So this can just be added in, and all of a sudden now you have a new technology that's being used. And then he's got really good validation across all this and usage contracts. So one of these things that's kind of difficult with defining stuff across dependencies and that is to make sure you've got all the things accounted for. So if you're expecting a widget over here to come through, you want a widget to come through over here. You want to make sure it's matching up. You spelled everything right. It's all hooked up, and you want to know quickly if it hasn't. So a high-level overview of how this works. We create and register features. So that's the main part of it. You can instantiate and register certain aspects if you need them. So things like Redux or Redux Logic, or he's got a built-in feature router that works well with React Native. Then you launch the app with the features and assets. It actually has a hook where you just define what it's going to do when it launches, and it takes care of it. It does all the heavy work of wiring things up and validating. And then features themselves can define what he calls facets or feature asset. And that's for cross-feature sharing. So I'll show you a little bit more about that. And features will basically define them, and other features will use them. So then that way, that's how you get the cross-sharing. And FeatureU can help manage and validate those facets. So like I said, if you define the contracts, it'll actually make sure that they exist and are spelled right and all that. So I don't know if you can read this chart very well, but you can look at the slides later, and it kind of just summarizes what I was talking about. We got a bunch of different features that make up your app. Launch app brings it all together. It exposes, it pulls all the facets that are defined across all the features, pulls it together into an object and gives it to your app. So here's just an example of kind of the structure you might use. I mean, you could really use whatever structure you want, but this seemed to work pretty well with feature-based development. And so you basically would have an index file that kicks everything off, calls the launch app, pulls together the features and all that. And then I like to have like a features directory, and then each directory an index that accumulates all of them, and then in different directories for each feature. So then, and that might just be an index file, or it could be an index and an actions file and a reducer file, and you could split it up however you want. Components, everything that's related to that feature can all live together right there in that one spot. So this feature object is kind of a key concept. So you basically call create feature, you give it a unique name, and this will, and if you name it the same thing, it'll complain because it got validation to make sure each feature's got a unique name. He's got an optional flag for if it's enabled or not, so you can actually toggle this on and off with logic, if you wanted. And then the facets part, that's where you actually would define and use facets, so you can actually define assets that you provide from your feature and assets you want to use. And in this case, then it would validate that those assets, those facets live or exist somewhere, that they're created. And then, in this case, if we're using Redux, then there might be a reducer that's associated with it. And if you're using Redux logic, then you might have a logic array that comes with it. And then some optional callbacks. App will start and an app did start, and it provides you hooks then where you can provide what the app is going to start up with the component, and also fire off other things later. So it gives you those nice hooks. And I mentioned in the feature directory I'd have like an index file, and in there I would basically import all of the features that I have, and then export them as an array. And so this will be the arrays, the array of features that gets used by our launch app. And so here's launch app, and this was in the source index file. So we might have a couple aspects that I've created here. I've used in Redux and Redux logic. If you don't have any, then those will be just be empty array. I got my features coming in from source feature index, and then basically called register root app, and kind of whatever code I need to do. So for web app, a React app, then you would call React DOM.render. For an Expo app, you call Expo.register root element, and whatever you need to do for your startup. So this will work with many different types of systems. So features, aspects, register, facets, kind of a context. So this cross-feature sharing, usage contracts. So this is this kind of evolved from the first version that Kevin created. He created the first version back in March. And like I said, he specifically was using Expo at the time. And then when I started to look at it to help him, I was going to put a web app with it, through it. Then we realized there needed to be some changes to make it a little simpler, a little bit different interfaces for UI sharing and cross-feature sharing. So we kind of evolved it, and then went through some design sessions, and then Kevin went back and implemented version 1. So this is what this usage contracts look like for cross-feature sharing. So basically, in this case, in the facets, I've got I'm saying that I'm going to use these types of assets, and I'm looking for a bar link component and a cat route component and a dog action .d, and I can actually say whether it's by default it'll be required. I can say it's not required. So it won't fail if it's missing. So maybe it's something that you're checking for, and later on that feature might become available. And then you can have a validation function. He's got some existing ones you can use. And then you can also support wildcards. So this is kind of a neat concept because you could say, I'm going to say throughout my different features, I'm going to specify components that are going to show up on the main menu of the app. And so different features can all specify a different link, or a different part that's going to show up on the different route or whatever. So for your app, so that way you can have wildcards. So then things can be added on the fly, and they'll show up. The define part is where your feature is actually providing the facet, And so you're basically just saying, here's a facet, here's the name, and here's, and I'm defining what it is. So I'm passing, like here, I'm actions, foo.actions. And then if you use the third one, the define use, it basically is saying, I'm defining it, but I also expect it to be used somewhere. So if it's not, then go ahead and throw an error, because I know this should match something that's already out there, and so I'm going to use that. So it's kind of a third thing. It's saying it's defined and used, and so this is kind of nice. If you, like I said, if you know it should match, that'll just help catch spelling errors and stuff like that. So that'll make sure that it gets used. Cross features. So this is a diagram that shows kind of that, and basically says each features are defining facets. They're using facets. And then launch app is basically making sure all these things exist, validating things, bringing them all together. And he does all the work for doing that. And then there's different ways to get at it. So getting at these facets, there's a higher order component called with facets that you can use to actually get different facets. There is also facets that's provided in some of those lifecycle hooks. So in the app did start, app will start. There's also an expand with facets feature. So sometimes you need this stuff at like load time, and it's not available yet because it's a dependency. You'll be a circular dependency. So he actually allows you to wrap it your function with a expand with facets, and then it'll pass you in the facets at the right time. Then you can do whatever you want with that, and then pass back the result. And so that allows you to get around the dependency problems. And then finally, launch app will also return a facets object, and so you can use that in certain circumstances as well, just to get at the facets. So lots of different ways to get that. He's got great documentation for this. All right, so the code walkthrough. So I got a couple different things, some samples and stuff, kind of show you how this works. All right, so let me go over to the where's my mouse? I see it over there, okay. There you go. I can see it over there, but all right. So here's an example of the source index. So basically you just call launch app, you provide it an array of aspects, you provide it an array of features, and then you call register root app. So kind of what we talked about. In this case, it's for a web app, so I'll call react dom.render. It's actually going to give me the root element, and I just use that and put it where I want on the DOM. I can also call register service worker and whatever else you want. So that's kind of the same stuff that comes right out of create React app. So that gets you up and going right there. Not a lot of work there. Oh. Okay. Don't want to be modifying stuff. I'm just trying to show it. All right. All right. So then next thing, the features. I've got a bunch of different features here. So I basically built this thing up one feature at a time just to kind of see how that would work, and Kevin just got this version 1 done just a few weeks ago. He's been working really hard on getting it out so we could show it to you guys. So I really wanted to bring it here to JSConf because this is a place where new things are shown and new ideas. So I think it's just a really exciting library and concept. So this is so he's different features I've got here, and so right now they're all commented out. You could also have enabled, turn them on and off with enable. All right, so let me just go here and turn app feature on, and let me jump down and do the next one. I'm going to do one more too. I'll do 3 at a time here, and then I can jump in. All right, so we'll save that. Go over here to my app. All right. Okay, so it's a basic, simple app. It's got right now it's got a home screen and about page. The about page says there's some content here. The home screen is actually just showing me the features that are turned on. So I haven't even really gotten to the meat yet, but that was just kind of, let's start with something. So what does this code look like? So the app, first thing you look at, I've created a feature name. I wanted it to be camel case, so I just put a camel case around it. Obviously this is a single word, it's not a problem. But if people copy paste code, so I wanted to make sure that if they use a dash or something, that it's camel case, so it would always work. And then basically here's my app component. I've got a browser router, so I've got a React router implementation here. I've got a header, so it says bookmark notes. And then I'm passing in some links and some routes. And so, and again, this was going to be, this will be provided down below here. So I'm just rendering those in a header and then down here in the main. And then here's my create feature for app. And so here I'm saying, okay, I'm wanting star.link.comp. So you come up with some kind of naming convention of how you want to map these things. Maybe there's, you could even put main menu or something, .link.component. So I'm going to say I need links and I need routes, and I'm going to display all those. And then here I'm taking advantage of the will start. I'm going ahead and I'm going to get the facets object and the current root element. And I'm actually the one that's creating this app, so I know that there shouldn't be an existing root app. And so then I go ahead and do a facets.get and get whatever I want. In this case, I'm getting the link components, and I'm also saying this with keys. And that just says I want to go ahead and get the name along with the component. So since it's got a unique name already, I want both things and give it to me back in an array. That's optional. You could just use index or whatever. But I go ahead and get the links, and I get the routes, and then I pass them in and render it. So that's basically gets you up and going, and that's what rendered that bookmark page. And then the next thing, let's look at the about, because that's real simple. Let me look right there. Okay. All right, so again, similar thing. It's called about. I'm saying that the URL path is /about. You could change that if you wanted, but I just used that as a unique name. So here I'm creating a link component. So with link, I'm passing in the URL, and here's the route component, passing in the URL. Here's my great content, and then down here I'm saying, all right, I'm defining this, and I expect it to be used somewhere. It should match. So I'm saying this feature name about.link.component. You could obviously just type it out, but I wanted to just make this kind of generic. And so that's all you need to do to be able to push that into the system. Once it got pulled in by the feature index, Launch app is able to just find it and hook it up and match the wildcards, and then it shows up. So then it's the same thing. And if we look at the other, the home page one, it's basically just pulling in the features list and then iterating through those and printing those out. So I'm basically just wanting to show what features are being defined. And so it's the same kind of thing. It's providing a link and a component. All right, and so then if we go back over to features, let's see, there it goes. All right, so now let's get a couple more features going. All right, so now I'm going to pull in the list feature and a load canned feature. So let's say you're developing, you don't even have you don't have the data yet. So you're going to go ahead and develop the list component, next, and then and then I'm going to go ahead and load in some data, just some canned data. So this is nice because if maybe the API is not even written yet, so you could just pull in an object structure that you're used to. Oh, okay. So it's one of the warnings. So now I'm actually, since I'm starting to use reducers and logic now, I've got to turn those on. So I didn't have those originally on because I didn't need them. So let me just flip that on. So back up here, I've got the feature Redux has an aspect and create logic aspect from Redux logic. So let me turn those on, and it'll be ready to go. All right, let's see if that solves it. Okay, so now we've got we can see all the different features that are turned on here, and then there's our about, and here's our list, and the list actually had a search, so we can search by whatever. It's doing a case-insensitive search on this, and we can do a remove, and and then of course it's using canned data. So if we refresh it, then it comes right back. So it doesn't really save anything, but at least we can make sure everything works and all that. So let's quickly look at that. So what did that look like? So the list. Okay, so for the list we had, we're providing actions in case somebody else wants to use some of our actions we're creating. We're providing some selectors, and then down here I'm providing a link and a component. And I'm saying for sure define and use. I'm expecting that to be used somewhere. These other ones may or may not be used. I'm just saying in the future somebody might need them. And then up here is my Redux stuff. So I'm creating some actions. There's some selectors, some initial state. I'm using my feature name as kind of the namespace for my state. So FeatureU has a nice way to be able to merge your reducers together. You just need to know where you want it to map it into the global state. So I'm just defining that as the path. It could be, something dot something or whatever. And then down here we've got the create actions. So these are just using the Redux actions to create some actions. And here I'm creating a reducer. And then here's a link, again, to the path. And then here's my selecting, so I can do the search. And then here I'm rendering all my items, and then exporting it out as the create feature. So that's that. And here's if we go over to the load canned, here I've got my canned list of data. I'm using this expand with facets so that I'm providing logic, but it's going to make a callback, and so it'll give me facets so I can go ahead and pull out the list.actions, because that's going to give me the type that I want to match up here for Redux logic. So I'm creating this, I'm doing a asynchronous call, and then I'm just responding with a canned list. And then that gets dispatched out and rendered. So that, and then here I'm using app.did.start, so I'm actually kicking that off so it'll dispatch this load when it launches up. So I don't have to have any hard-coded stuff there. All right. And then, so then I think we're about wrapping up here, but let me get to the final one. So this mouse is hard, so let me get to the features. There we go. All right, so now let's go ahead and just finish it. We'll go ahead and we're going to bring in there's an add feature where we can add things, and then we'll go ahead and save things in local forage. It'll use whatever the browser has for storage capabilities. And so now if we go back over here, we've got all of the things turned on, and then we can add a new thing here, and it shows up down here. We still got the search and about and list and all that. So basically all working. And yeah, so that it basically works. I mean, you can basically build these things up, feature at a time. I basically swapped the new storage feature in and swapped out the old can feature. And if everything's all matched up, then it'll just boom, you're ready to go. So. It's pretty nice to be able to upgrade things. You could easily roll back to the previous thing. You could do it, A/B testing and whatever. So that's kind of nice. So let me go back to the code and we'll hit the home stretch here. All right. So okay, and then there's another app that Kevin wrote that's called Eatery Nod, and I'll just show you. I won't go into details with it. Nope, that's not what I want. Because we're running late on time, but basically it's you got links to it in my show notes. But he's got it's well documented with diagrams and everything. So this is like a little React Native app Expo app that you can have restaurants be pulled in and then create a list of those, and then basically it'll give you a random list. So if you have trouble deciding where to take your significant other, you can just pull up this app and press a button. It'll randomly pick something, and then you can use that to go. And so that's what he created. It just kind of wants something fun. And so it's all well documented as far as that goes. But same concept, and since it has all those hooks, it works great for React Native, and works great for React Web. So he's got authorization, so it's a full app, and he's got it all blown out into different separate files and everything. So I'll just let you look at that on your own. Let's see, next. Oh. All right. Okay, and so finally where was I at on here? Best practices, so just a few things to note. I think it's pretty simple to use once you try it. But the good thing is to avoid cross-feature imports. So instead of importing from feature A to feature B directly, use the facets sharing, and that makes it plug and play. So then if something else comes along and implements those features, you can turn this one off, turn that one up, so you don't have to be changing a lot of files with imports and things. So that's great. It also helps for swapping and for A/B testing, for mocking, all that kind of stuff. Take advantage of the usage contracts, the define use and the use, so that basically we'll catch spelling mistakes. use wildcards to be able to pull things in for like the menus and all that. Feature name is required to be unique, and it'll complain if it's not. And so normally if you're using a single file, then you can put it right in there. But if you're using lots of other files and you're going to use it in those files, then it's a good practice to put it in a separate file and then just import that into the various things. And that'll prevent circular dependencies and all that. So that's just a kind of a note that once you've been doing this stuff. So I think it really simplifies things. I mean, I was really impressed at how it got things up and going. And it also just made it very easy to get Redux up and going and Redux logic. You didn't really have to mess with, we just pulled in the aspect, and then it did all the wiring. And then basically now we just create features and define a reducer, define a logic, and it pulls it in and wires it up where it needs to go. So I thought that's really nice. It's kind of, it's easier to do that than most anything. So. Besides being able to do feature development, it's also nice for just getting wired up. Flexible and extensible. He started with a few different technologies, but you could extend this to anything. It's really, there's nothing that's locking it down, and he's kind of got some great documentation here to show that. It could be used in other languages and frameworks. Let me just bring up the page here. So this is Kevin AST FeatureU is his website. Again, he's got a lot of great docs in here. He's got the featureu.js.org is his documentation site, and it's awesome. He just goes through and explains everything, how it works. Down here is the core API, so it breaks out all the things I talked about and different. One thing I didn't mention is it kind of uses objects for a lot of the parameters. And so sometimes the way this API or where this renders, it doesn't really show you it's like a named parameter or a destructured parameter. And so, but there is basically objects that you're passing in for a lot of these parameters. And so you don't have to necessarily use all of them. If you just need one or two, you can just specify the ones you need. So just a note there. But yeah, this is a great, he does great documentation. So this is fantastic for that. Let's see. I think we're down to the final thing. So the slides were at codewinds.com/JSConf 2018. There's the other repo stuff. Contact me if you got questions or whatever. I'm happy to answer that, or have a beer later. Let me know if you got ideas or things you want to use it for. Twitter handle and GitHub is Jeff Bieske, and I appreciate letting me speak to you. Thank you.